I just want to introduce our panelists today who will be speaking on mixing modernisms and media. So this is kind of exciting because we're combining filmmakers, people who do a scholarship on film and cinema and media, as well as an active artist and who works in mixed media. So it's kind of interesting to mix actual artifact media with digital media. And Professor Victoria Timpanaro, who will be speaking on modernisms in 1960s horror cult film. Professor Timpanaro also works in the MPT department, if you don't know. She's also an amazing filmmaker, musician, and the manager of production services at Essex County College. She also runs the college's educational access stations for Cablevision Channel 77 and Verizon Fios Channel 37. So if you don't know, if you live in the area, you can watch programming made by ECC students and staff and the amazing staff at MPT, the Media Production Technology Center, on your TV. We actually share channel space with Newark Public Schools. So a lot of what goes on at the college you can see on Cablevision and on Verizon Fios. Victoria teaches Cinema 101, Introduction to the Art of Film. And her academic career started at Brookdale Community College, where she received an AA in music and an AAS in TV video production. She was also an active member of the Alpha Pi Theta chapter of the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. And at Ramapo College, she earned a double BA in electronic music and digital video art, while minoring in video studies. Victoria completed her MA in Media Studies at the New School. Her thesis work, a documentary entitled Indie Cult Horror, examined underground horror films of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. She is currently working on a new documentary series titled Real Women, looking at women in horror and sci-fi films. And Victoria is actually one of the leading, I would say, experts. Yeah, I'm going to kind of call you out now. One of the leading experts on George Romero's Night of the Living Dead in the country. She has interviewed just about everybody in that film. So nobody else. All right, so.
Okay, so when thinking about modernism, it's not a concept that we usually apply in film. In film studies, we like to talk about postmodern a lot. So modern, I had to kind of define that for me. And I decided that modernism in film is relating what is in society. It's encapsulated, and it's trying to explain what the culture is feeling at the time. So my students know that there's two films I really like to talk about, and that's Psycho and Night of the Living Dead. So, we have to find how can we relate those two important films of the 60s to the concept of modernism, right? So this is my background. We're going to talk about the 1950s first. If you can hear this, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal. So America in the 50s. Some would want you to believe that America spent the 1950s living in a Norman Rockwell painting. But this is not the case. So actually, we had McCarthyism, the Red Scare, the Cold War, and the fear of the bomb. These things made us stay inside, lock the doors, and pull the blinds tightly shut. Americans no longer wanted to know their neighbor. Instead now, we were just scared of them. So, as you can see. So now we've had McCarthyism. So, before this, what were we scared of before McCarthy happened? In the 40s, there was the traditional Gothic horrors that Universal so elegantly brought to the big screen. Monsters like Lugosi's Dracula, Karloff's Frankenstein monster, and Chaney's Wolfman gave nightmares to children everywhere. But once these stories had been bled dry, we had to shift our focus to what made us scared now. So in the 1950s, we get the big monsters, right? We get aliens, radioactive bugs, and creatures from black lagoons. So this was everything that scared us pre-1960. So now we have that in our background, right? A lot can be said by a culture from the underground and experimental art that it produces. The B-level films that come out of the nooks and crannies of the country tend to be closer to the pulse of the collective consciousness than the A pictures that are generated by the Hollywood machine. So let us look at the society of the 60s and the decade that became synonymous with counterculture. By the time the 60s rolled around, these previous terrors started to feel pedestrian, thanks to growing paranoia and McCarthyism and the so-called threat of the communists. We stopped fearing that things could go bump in the night, and we started worrying about the unknown entity living in that house next door. The other in society was now us, right? We're not scared of monsters anymore. That's really tame, right? What's really scary? People. So there's two films that really bring this new bleak trend in horror to the forefront. And those are Hitchcock's Psycho, obviously, and Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. Both of these films are the first times that we look at a person as something evil, as someone who looks normal, not a deformed creature of any type or somebody who has some sort of bizarre birth defect. They're normal-looking people. Now, okay, you're going to say, Hitchcock, that's not a cult filmmaker, right? But the thing you have to remember about this particular film is that when Hitch brought this concept to the I believe it's Universal, he had Richard Bloch's novel. The studio didn't want to support it. It was an odd choice, especially for a man who did these big, grand films, right? So Hitch said, fine, give me a small budget. I'll do it in black and white. I'll shoot it with my TV crew, and I'll do it like an independent film. So that's why you get that kind of grassroots feel from a film like Psycho, even though it was produced and distributed by Universal. For a big-name director to choose to work this way was extremely radical at the time. But the harsh reality of black and white makes everything feel much more real to us. We're still coming out of an age where we watch our news in newsreels. The newsreel is always a gritty black and white type of film that basically was kind of like watching encapsulated news now. So this is what we're used to. We saw the war this way. So now anything that we see in this black and white context, to us, feels like the TV news in reality. The thing that was strange about Psycho was the fact that Norman Bates is the evil entity, right? He's our other. Norman looks like a normal guy. He's a little awkward, but he seems normal, right? But he makes us question that quiet man who lives on the edge of town, right? He's an outcast. He's an outsider. He's not one of us. And even in this, there's a great scene in the film where the two people who are trying to track down the missing woman, Marion, they go to see the town sheriff. And the sheriff and his wife are like, oh, Norman, how's he doing? Like, oh, he's just Norman. It's not a big deal. So, of course, everyone's a little shocked when it does turn out to be Norman, who's killing people and sticking them in the woods. The other part of very 1960s cinema in this is this pop psychology. At the end of the film, we have to explain Norman away, right? This isn't normal in society. What happened here? We need someone, an authority figure, to come out at the end of the film and explain to us, well, Norman has a problem mentally. So now we have this added concept within the 60s films of psychology. And what does psychology really mean? It means Norman was somehow created by society, right? I mean, we've explained him away, therefore we're somewhat responsible. Right? This is what psychology can do in this context. So another film, so in contrast, is Peeping Tom. Peeping Tom is a little smaller film. It's a British film. And again, it's this kind of loner who's gone out on his own and he is killing women. The thing about Peeping Tom that was also very groundbreaking, aside from the fact that he looked like a normal person, also 1960, the same year as Psycho, he looks like Norman, he looks like a normal guy. This is one of the first ones that really takes advantage in horror of the POV, the point of view shot. So he's not just implicating this normal-looking guy in society, it's implicating you, the viewer. You're now responsible for the deaths of these women because you have felt some sort of ownership in this point of view shot. Again, here's another film that makes people, especially women, learn to fear that kind yet awkward stranger living next door. And also, This is a film that uses pop psychology. There's a lot of overtones of the fact that his father used him in sort of these social psychological experiments as a child. And again, we're given this harsh and bleak reality that not only people are capable of such atrocities, but they are possibly a product of the society around them. So, that's 1960. As the decade continued, many subgenres began to explore the concept of paranoia and the fear of humanity. Films about girl gangs, bikers, these showed the concept of the organized other. Roger Corman's Wild Angels and Russ Meyer's Faster Pussycat Kill Kill are two examples of this innate fear of groups, especially groups of unruly youth. We are scared of the younger version of us at this point in society. We don't know what the next generation is really going to bring. On the opposite side of the spectrum are the films that show us the fear of being outnumbered. In 1964, you had The Last Man on Earth. And even in 1968, this one seems like a stretch, The Planet of the Apes. Apes are very human in this film, right? So there's still this concept of the mass of the other, right? Same thing as in Last Man on Earth, which is, we know this adaptation of the Matheson story many times, but in this case it's vampires. So they had been people, now they've become the other. In both films, one man is left to try and survive in a world that has been turned upside down, be it from vampires or intelligent apes that have taken over civilization. So we have this fear that everyone else in society might come against us and overrule us. So that's the mid-60s. So possibly the best example of this survival brand of paranoia is George Romero's 1968 classic, Night of the Living Dead. So Night of the Living Dead is a strange film in general. It's definitely an independent film. It's made from outside Hollywood or the New York film system, which at the time was another big entity. And it's a group of 10 professionals. So they're not college kids. These are people who have been working in the industry but on the sidelines. They've been working in the commercial industry, they've been working in the industrial film industry. So 10 people who already had the skills and the equipment decided, let's make a feature film. And what they did was each of these 10 original people, which became Image 10, made an investment. So we have the concept of creating art as a collective unit that has an invested and monetary decision-making process. So because they have this very documentary-like approach to filming, because they're used to making industrial films and commercials where we want to represent life in a real fashion as opposed to creating fiction beforehand, this film feels a little more real than what most people are used to from a horror film. It's always said that it has a documentary, gritty, handheld style. And again, we're kind of harkening back, because this is a black and white film, to this concept of the newsreel, and how the newsreel is telling us what is real, especially in Night. Night takes a really great example of, I guess it's a little Marshall McLuhan in there, because we're talking about the medium as the message. They, of course, the survivors in this film, get all their information from news sources. There's the radio, there's the television, and they follow directly what they're told, or they take what they're told by the media as fact. So, in Night we see that the bad guys are us, right? Zombies were people 2 days ago, but now they're not. So instead of the great unwashed masses, now we have the undead masses. Pretty close. The true root of conflict in Night, though, is not the zombies. What it is the harsh reality we have to face inside with the survivors. The struggles of man against man and the conflict of the ageist society are harder to deal with than the Walking Dead are outside. While many have speculated that Night is allegory for the racial tensions in our nation during the late 60s, this is 1968, this approach is not particularly valid if you know the history behind the making of the film. Yes, Dwayne Jones is a rare black protagonist in a film of this era, but race is never mentioned anywhere in the context of the narrative. In reality, basically what happened was they wrote the script, they went to local community theaters and other actors that they knew, had people audition. Dwayne was the best person who read for the part. They, being of the younger hip generation, We're like, okay, so a black guy got the part. Does that mean we have to change it? No, why would we do that? We wrote a film about a guy, and he's a guy. So nothing was changed to really accommodate for that. Later, while they were filming, Dwayne Jones did make some recommendations that some things he thought might come off a little awkward coming from him. But in general, the film was not altered because of race. So on the other hand, while race may not have been an issue within the story, it is clear that culture class prevents the people who band together to be able to work together in order to survive that night. Could age be the reason that the more mature and hard-headed Harry Cooper refuses to listen to the youthful and confident Ben? Does it hurt or hinder the task when young and impressionable Tom and Judy seem incapable of making any useful decisions? Perhaps the true message of Night is that the only way that we can survive in this scary place we call America, especially in the 1960s, is to put aside our differences and learn to work together. If we as a society could start to open up those blinds and learn to trust our neighbors again, then maybe that boy next door will cease to be the next Norman Bates. Maybe then we can only be sure that the people on our block aren't a bunch of commies and they're not the zombie hordes coming after us. Thank you.